Well, my name is Steve Plank. Nobody calls me Steve. Everybody calls me Planky. Plankytronics, that's my sort of handle for Twitter and my web and my blog and so on. And I'm a cloud evangelist at Microsoft. So when you think about Azure, Azure is more than just this bit here, cloud services. Everybody you hear this phrase, cloud services, Windows Azure, or Microsoft Azure Cloud Services. But I've taken this is out of the portal. I've taken it, turned it sideways, and this is basically all the different services. So Azure is big. When I first started, it was this, cloud services, and Azure SQL DB, and that was it. There was nothing else. Very shortly after that, they started to add things like Service Bus and Access Control Service and so on. But this has just gradually grown over a period of time. Some of these things don't they don't sort of fit into cloud. Like for example, Visual Studio Online. You know, it just happens to be that Azure is a really good delivery vehicle for delivering this, and people who want to be doing cloud development and doing that kind of thing, this is a great delivery vehicle for it. But it's not, you know, I wouldn't say it's cloud computing in the sense that something like a virtual machine running in one of our data centers in another part of the world is. Okay, so it's a lot. The bit that I'm going to talk about today, just to get you started, is the bit where all the compute happens. So, there's a little bit missing off the end here, websites. So there's websites, virtual machines, mobile services, and cloud services. This is where you can get computers to execute instructions and execute your code. I mean, that happens a little bit on some of this other stuff down here, but this is mostly infrastructure to support this stuff. Now, at the moment, we've got 13 data centers around the world. The number of data centers is growing all the time. When I first started, which was about 3 years ago, we had 8 data centers. So if you look at where these are, you can see there's 2 in China. The thing about the Chinese data centers is that you have to register at this URL, and you'll understand it if you're Chinese because you go there and it's just a bunch of Chinese characters. Basically, you have to be in China. So you have to go through the Chinese registration. You have to be in the Chinese borders to be able to see those data centers. There's 2 in Japan, there's 2 in Asia, Southeast Asia and East Asia. There's 2 in Dublin. Strangely, the one that's to the west is called North Europe, and the one that's to the east is called West Europe. But there you go, Dublin and Amsterdam. Then there's North, South, East and West US and Brazil. So all those data centers exist today. This year we will be delivering 2 other data centers in Australia, one on the Western Australia, one in Eastern Australia. And there are also a whole bunch of CDN, Content Delivery Network endpoints, all around the world, 23 of them. Some of them align with existing data centers, and some of them they're just in where there are centers of population. So if you want to get the content that you have on, let's just say, your website to where your customers are, you can see this is where most of the world's population tends to live, or most of the world's population that has good access to technology. I just want to show you a video of how Generation 4, there are 6 generations of data center that we operate. To give you some idea, the previous diagram, the Chicago data center, the one in the north, is the same size as 9¼ football pitches, soccer pitches, not American football pitches, although I don't believe there's a great difference in the size of the 2 pitches. And there are 6 generations of data center. The one that is the most interesting, I think, from a sort of a building data center's point of view is the Gen 4 data center. And I'll just show you this video of how a Gen 4 data center is built. We start with framing, flooring, server racks, transformer, control panel, partitions, fans, exhaust dampers, buzz bars, servers, lights, mixing dampers, air washer, drain pipes, air washer supports, air washers, intake louvers, filters and louvers, skill. And then we've got our shipping container with our computers in it. Then that is called an IT pre-assembled component, and we have some for computers, for cooling, and for power. We provide 3 connections to each of these things, and you notice they don't live inside a building, they live outside. A Gen 4 data center, everything's outside. Very easy to swap things. So the swappable unit isn't the hard drive or the power supply or even the entire rack-mounted server inside the unit. It's the entire 40-foot shipping container with all of these thousands of servers in it. So what happens is, you know, we get a failure, our power supply fails, we mark the power supply as failed, we move the workloads off that machine, put them somewhere else. Something else fails, we move the workloads. Something else fails, we move the workloads. When there's a reasonable number of failures inside the shipping container, then we swap the entire shipping container. So that's the kind of operations that the Gen 4 data centers work on. The Gen 5 and Gen 6 data centers, of which are being built in Dublin right now, the difference between a Gen 1 and a Gen 6 data center is just the pure density that they can fit of total number of servers per square foot of floor area. It's incredibly high. The computers that we use are custom built for Microsoft. We don't have our own manufacturing plant or anything like that, but we work with the large computer manufacturers and say, this is a spec of a board that we want. You know, a circuit board will have 2 computers on it, 2 servers on it. So it's just one board, but it's actually got 2 servers on it. It may have multiple cores, as you'd expect. When I talk about data, each data center, there's 2 data centers here. Each data center will store your data 3 times in the data center across 3 different fault boundaries. So the data gets stored across different routers, different network segments, different battery backup units, different power supplies, so that it would take pretty catastrophic failure to lose all 3 copies of your data. But you might lose 1 copy of your data. Let's imagine that disk there caused you to lose 1 copy of your data. Well, that's okay, because we've got a data center, we've got 2 other good copies of the data. It means we can just mark that disk as bad and get the data from somewhere else, some other place where it's already stored. Now, by default, what happens is the data in one data center is automatically paired up with another data center. In Europe, it's the 2 European data centers, Dublin and Amsterdam. So if I start writing data into Dublin, my data will automatically be geo-replicated to Amsterdam. There's an API that I can use to tell me sort of what the delay is, how long that delay is. It's not something which happens instantly. It's something which is happening every few seconds. So what that means is that you have your new data in the other data center as well. So it gives you pretty good protection against something drastic happening. So if you had the failure of an entire data center, like the Dublin data center, and bear in mind that the Dublin data center is right next to the Amazon AWS data center in Dublin. And about 2 years ago, the Amazon data center was taken out, the entire data center was taken out by a lightning strike. Well, we are literally right next door to it. So that lightning strike could have just gone, you know, sort of 25, 30 meters to the right-hand side, and that would have taken out our entire data center. So a lot of people always think, you know, an entire data center being taken out is things like an earthquake. No. It can be things like lightning strikes and those sorts of things. So a pretty common phenomenon could take out an entire data center, but at least you would have access to your data. Okay, now you can get started for free. You can activate a free subscription. I've done it quite a lot of times, and I run out of live IDs and credit cards to do it with, because there's a fraud check to make sure you don't just keep registering the same credit card and never ever pay for any services. But there's some URLs you can use here. There's a free trial, this one here. That gives you a 30-day trial and £200 to spend on resources. If you're an MSDN subscriber, you can add MSDN benefits to your subscription. So depending on whether you're Ultimate or Professional or what's the other one? Whatever the other one is. If you're a BizSpark member, so BizSpark is a program operated by Microsoft to help startups get started with using Microsoft software. It's a 3-year program. You sign up to BizSpark. There's some criteria. For example, you have to be, I think it's less than $1 million or less than 5 million turnover. One of those 2, I can't remember what it is. So, you know, it's a genuine startup, not a huge business that's already established. 3-year program, you get access to all of the Microsoft software on MSDN to use for free. And you can use it in production as well. So you can use Office, for example, Visual Studio, those kinds of things. And you also can add Azure benefits to your BizSpark subscription. And if you want to talk to somebody about that, there's a lady here called Elena who you could talk to about that afterwards. And then there's the Microsoft Partner Network as well. So if you're part of the Partner Network, you can add Azure benefits to your subscription. Okay, I'm going to show a video now. Okay, so when you want to sign up for a free trial subscription, you end up on this page. Signing up to a free Azure trial is simple. First of all, log into your Microsoft account. This is what used to be called a live ID. If you've got an @hotmail.com, @live.com, or @outlook.com ID, use that. If not, to get a Microsoft account, go to signup.live.com and you can sign up for one there. Once you have it, go to http://aka.ms/mscloudtrial. That will take you to this page where you click the Try It Now button. You can see here it's already extracted a little bit of information about me from when I logged in using my Microsoft account. I need to enter a telephone number, and I should expect either a text message or a call depending on what I selected. They'll give me a special one-time code. Now this is part of the anti-fraud measures. After I've clicked the send button, I need to get hold of the number they sent and type it into the verify code box and then click the button. I can now enter credit card information. Now you will not be charged. Your spending limit will be set to 0.00. This is just an additional anti-fraud measure. An identity check is done using the card. This just ensures you aren't an anonymous person who wants to use the service for some kind of criminal or illegal purpose. So it's now just a case of simply filling in the credit card information. Once that's done, agree to the terms and conditions. And in this case, I bail out of receiving marketing communications and then click the Sign Up button, which is now complete. Now click the Portal button in the top right corner and you come to a little welcome wizard. You might want to read these items, but I'm skipping through because I've read it all before. You're now logged into the Azure portal. You can see your credit status in the green box at the top of the screen. This is not money you have paid. This is the free amount of credit Microsoft gives you as part of the free trial. That's it. You're done. Now, anytime you want to get back to the portal, for example, if you want to create a website, just go to http://manage.windowsazure.com and log in. Great. So I just want to do a demo now of creating an ASP.NET website just to give you a flavor of how that works. I'm going to use Visual Studio. So I'll fire up Visual Studio. I'm using Visual Studio 2013 with the Windows Azure SDK installed, and I've got my Windows Azure subscription, and I've gone through a process of telling Visual Studio about my Windows Azure subscription. So I can just go New Project. I will start a web project. This one's called Web Application 10. Let's call it Planky Web 2. I'm sure I've got a web one there somewhere. I'll just do a standard web forms application. This is the Windows Azure box, which I've already gone through the process of managing my subscription. I've got several subscriptions, so I've just managed the correct one so I can deploy something. And then I'm sure you've all done this before. You know, if you've ever done an ASP.NET development, it's just a process of creating an ASP.NET website. But because I've got, because I'm going to deploy to Windows Azure, it comes up with some stuff and asks me about this. It says, which subscription do you want to use? Where do I want to deploy? By default, it's taken my last data center, North Europe. I won't bother about a database. I'll just say OK to this. And it goes away, and it creates the project for me. So it's, apart from the little details of Windows Azure, it's pretty much standard for starting off any ASP.NET application. What I can do now, well, you'll see it's going to fire up in a second. It's giving me some status down here. It's going to fire up in a second, and we'll have an ASP.NET web app running. So it says it's ready. So what I'm going to do now is right-click on this and hit Publish. So this just comes up with some sort of connection information. I can then go here, which says what configuration do I want to do. I'll do the released configuration. It then says, would you like to see a preview? No, I'm going to go straight to publishing it. So I hit Publish, and it's going to do Web Deploy now. So if you've used Web Deploy, then Web Deploy already exists in a Windows Azure website. If we look down here, we should see the status down here somewhere. Oh yeah, here we go. We'll give it a couple of moments, and it fires up the website. So any of you in this room now, if you've got a mobile device, you could hit plankyweb2.azurewebsites.net, and you would see this web page. So it's pretty simple to do. If I go back into the whole thing, let's just find a page to modify. Default.aspx. If I just design this. If I just make that into, imagine I'm making, you know, thousands of lines of code change. I've just written planky dot in there, but imagine it was something else. Save it away, hit Publish again. Publish, and the great thing about Publish is it understands what the deltas are between what was published the previous time and what's published this time. So we should get that pretty quickly up, and you can see that. So that, you know, it's a fairly quick sort of thing to do. Creating a website, very easy to do. Question there?
Is it easy to do Publish command line? I'm just thinking if you want to have like a CI environment, like a Teamspeak or something, if you wanted to then convert an existing site to your site,
Right.
to keep that sort of build environment going.
Yeah, well, I don't know actually. Does anybody happen to know whether there is a command line interface for Web Deploy?
Well, you can use Git first, can't you?
Yeah, but what if you wanted to use Web Deploy from Visual Studio? Okay, so there is a command. So it's just the same as using Web Deploy in your own environment, except you're now doing it to Windows Azure. Okay.
Sorry, can you use your own domain on Azure.net?
Yeah. So there's some other stuff you might want to do to neaten this up afterwards. You could register a domain with GoDaddy. You can tell Windows Azure websites that you want to use that domain name, and it will register that domain name for you. Yeah. The one thing that we don't have in Azure yet is our own DNS like registrar. So you've got to go to a third-party DNS registrar to get your domain name in the first place. Okay, let's go back. Where did I get to? That was a video in case it all went wrong. So next thing is creating a server. In case some of these things go wrong, I've got a video of every single one of them, just in case of a failure. The last time I presented here, I got halfway through the thing and all the lights went out and everything just died for about 15 minutes. So I'm protecting against that. So next thing you might want to do then is create a server. Just create a server to do something with it. I don't know, install IIS on it, install an app onto it if you want to do that. Not that you really need to because you've got Azure websites and it's much easier to manage. But maybe you want to deploy an application. So let's go through the process of doing that. So I do that in the portal itself. Come to virtual machines. And it's really simple. I say new, virtual machine from the gallery. And in the gallery, you can see there's quite an extensive list of different types of images that can be deployed. So if we go up here, I've got Windows servers. I've got a SharePoint trial that will eventually become a SharePoint server. Different versions of SQL Server already installed onto the VMs. Different versions of BizTalk Server. I've got the JDK version 7 from Oracle, all the different Oracle database and application servers. There's a Windows server with Visual Studio already installed on it. There's a whole bunch of SUSE, Ubuntu, OpenLogic, Oracle Linux, and then there's a Puppet Enterprise server as well if you're really into using, I was going to say Puppet out of Puppet and Chef. And then all these blue ones at the bottom here are disks that or systems that I've deployed in the past and I've just hung on to the disks for. So if I go back to the start here and say this one here, Server 2012 R2 Data Center, let me just show you that so you can see. So Server 2012 R2 Data Center, and then I have to fill in some of these boxes. So if I go to, sorry, let me just come out of that. Let's call this Plunky VM. I'll put it into the standard tier. I can specify the size of the machine I want. Let's say a 4-core with 28 gigs of RAM. I've got to supply a username for the administrative account, and it can't be administrator or admin. That's an obvious attack, isn't it? And then I'm going to put it into a VM always lives inside a cloud service, so I'll just create a brand new cloud service for it. By default, it takes the machine name. I then specify where I want to deploy this, so I'll say North Europe. I specify where I want to store the data. I've got a storage account to do that. Or you can just say, I have no idea how to do this. Automatically generate a storage account for me. I won't bother about availability set, and I'll just click the Go button. Click the Go button. Okay, it says, what kind of agents do you want to install on this? So the default agent does things like, one of the nice things it does, for example, is, BG Info? You ever use that on servers where you get a little box up here and it tells you what the server name is, what its IP address is, all that kind of stuff. Puts that on for you. It enables also remote debugging for Visual Studio. So if you were to deploy a website, for example, you could debug that remotely. You can also put on the Puppet, the Chef agents. You can put on one of your own custom scripts. And you can also choose how you want to secure your system. I'll just put the Microsoft Security anti-malware on there. But you've also got Symantec and Trend Micro. I click Go, and that's going to take around about 8 minutes to deploy. Okay, so here's one I prepared earlier called Plunky ADFS, because I'm not going to sit here for 8 minutes waiting for this to happen. So this is a server that I've already deployed, and I'll show you a couple of things. It's got an HTTP endpoint that I've added to it. Port 80 has been added. So between the server and the internet, there is a connection, which means I should be able to get into it. It's also got the remote desktop protocol installed. So if I go back to the machine and say connect, I should be able to connect to this using RDP. Whoops, what happened there? This is where I cross my fingers and hope that it works. I need somebody with a good joke at this point.
Or a video.
Yeah, or a video. Yeah, because that's the other thing I did on the video was I edited out anything with an hourglass. I just edited it out, so it happens really quickly. Okay, so and I'll put the password in, and I should just end up on the desktop of that machine. Now, I could have waited for the other one to deploy and done that in 8 minutes' time, but I'm sure you get the idea. While that's happening, I've got a naked website on there. So if I click this link here, in fact, if I copy the link, because that's going to take me to the management endpoint, and paste it in here, it just takes me to the IIS. So any of you could now go to adfsplanky.cloudapp.net, and you would be logged into the default IIS web server that's been installed onto that machine. It's actually also running ADFS. Okay, so that's VMs. Very simple. You know, just go through the process. Click, 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 click. You get a VM, connect to it, then start installing stuff onto it. You know, copy files onto it, run setup.exe, run IIS configurations, install your code onto it. You become responsible for managing the entire machine exactly as you would do if it was in your own data center. Okay, so if it needs to be patched, you're going to have to patch it. If it needs to have a service pack applied, you're going to have to do it. If the hard drive for the operating system is 97% full and it's running like a dog, it's you that's going to have to deal with that problem. Okay, so there's other ways of dealing with those things. With Azure websites, for example, all you get to see is the website, and all of the management of that is done for you underneath the covers. You never get to see that. Okay, let's go back to the slides. So the next one is mobile services. So a mobile service is, I think you may have seen that in Bayat's talk, but maybe I'll just go through the whole process of creating it very quickly. So a mobile service is where you have a mobile device and you want to do things like store data, do authentication, do push notifications, a couple of other things. But you want to have basically a set of APIs that are managed for you, that the infrastructure is managed for you, and that are very easy to call, and for which we also provide client software that you can instantiate inside all the different sorts of platforms. So let's have a look at that. Is that the right one? No, that one there. So I go mobile services, I say new mobile service, create, give it a name, Planky Mobile 2. I've got an existing SQL database that I can use, so I'll just use that. I'm going to deploy this to North Europe, which is in Dublin. You'll notice here actually that it seems to be like a fairly small list. Most of the reason for that is because Microsoft gives me a subscription to use for demos to you guys, and they will restrict the places that I can deploy things to based on, you know, the amount of availability and resources and the amount of money they want me to spend and those sorts of things. You would typically see the full list of all of the data centers if that service is available in every data center, or if it's only available in, let's just say, you know, 8 of the data centers. Usually if a preview feature, then you just see those 8, but you wouldn't see as few as I typically get here. We'll run our backend in JavaScript. The options are JavaScript or .NET. I need to provide some credentials for the database that I'm going to use. Okay, so it's now going away and it's creating a mobile service. Now, that takes about a minute, probably slightly longer than that. So I've got another one here, HOIPE. Here's one I prepared earlier. So here's one I prepared earlier. And you can see, when you look at the dashboard for it, it's got the capability of handling, this single mobile service could handle all of these clients connecting to it. Windows Store, Windows Phone, iOS, Android, HTML, JavaScript, Xamarin, or PhoneGap. So you could write one or all of the applications on all of those platforms and connect to this single Azure mobile service. So let's just imagine Android is kind of like the one that we all talk about with mobile. So imagine I'm going to create a new Android application. Then it's a 1, 2, 3 process. 1, get the tools. I've already got the Android developer tools installed down here somewhere. There they are. Number 2, create a table. So I'm going to have a database sat behind this, and this will create the table for me. And 3, download and run your app. So, well, I've already got, this one has already been done. I've already gone through the process of this. And if I show you in here, I downloaded the application and I went File, Import, and I imported it into this Android development tool. I have not touched this application at all. I've just completely, vanilla application that's been downloaded. And what you can see in here are a few interesting things. In the libs directory, you can see there is mobile services. This is a binary jar, so that's the mobile services client. Exposes a whole bunch of objects with methods that you can use to talk to that back-end service. So you don't have to write complicated REST code. And then the core code itself. So if I go to this to-do activity Java class here, and we have a look at the imports, you can see there's a whole load of mobile services stuff here. Hopefully you can see that. Windows Azure Mobile Services, there's client table, filter callback, etc. And also, if we just scroll down a little bit more, you'll see that it's not just boilerplate code, it's actually customized. So if I just zoom into this bit here, you can see here the mobile services client has been initialized with two values, https:/HOIPE, remember that? hoip.azuremobile.net. And then that other number there is an application key. So anybody that's got that application key can get access to this mobile service. Okay, so I could just run that, and I've actually already got the emulator running here. So if I just hit run, then we watch the emulator. It should fire up in here. It gives me the status down here. So there's my mobile service now running. Now, before I came in here and started doing this presentation, I was faffing around at the back, so I've got one entry in the database already. But this is my mobile services application. It's a to-do items, a to-do list. So let's just say give the live demo is on my to-do items. Whoops. Oh no, I've got to do it like this. Look. G. Oh, sorry. G I V E the demo. Okay, then I click the add button, and what's going to happen is that data is, or there's going to be a call made into that mobile services client, which is going to package that up into a JSON package, make a REST call, do a push of that data into the database, and when the database has been written, then it returns that data there to say effectively that the item has been written into the database. Now I can prove that by going into the database and having a look at it. So if I go into my mobile service, into data, there's the to-do items data, the to-do items table. And we can see there's the give the demo option. No, actually, you didn't see it beforehand, did you? Let me do it again, just in case you don't trust me. In fact, what I could do is delete that one. So that's going to mark that entry as false, and I'll put another thing in here. I don't know, j. Okay, so now when I go back to this table and I refresh, we should see that data, yeah. So there's all that horrible data. Notice that the complete flag is set to true on the previous two entries. You didn't see this one because I did it outside. That's the one I just did. That's been set to true. This one's currently false. If I go back to the app and I click that, which means I've completed this item now, then the complete field, if I refresh, what's that's going to change from false to true? False to true, there. Ta-da! Okay, so that's mobile services. Very quick run through mobile services. Again, very easy to get up and started with. Not a difficult job to do. Let's go back to the slides and have a look at the next one, which is cloud services. Okay. So if I go to the portal again, this time I'm going to go to a different subscription I've got. You can see there's another, here's one I prepared earlier there, so you know what's coming. So if I now create a new cloud service, now the question is, I suppose, what is a cloud service? So let me just do a quick sort of view of what that could be. I'm sure you've all got diagrams like this on whiteboards and in documents and so on back at your base, which shows a complicated application with a web front end, that's one tier, a business tier, a database tier at the back end, and you've always got other bits that hang around, like something which is used for reporting. It calls into these things, something which is using for monitoring. You can imagine other things used for backup and so on. So imagine this Imagine being able to describe that. Imagine being able to take a photograph of that and then have the photograph, rather than producing that exact image, what it did was it produced an XML description of that. Well, that's what I've got, okay? And that XML description is called a service model. And I've got part of that description in a file just here. And you can see here, it says things like, we've got this role. Oh, let me just zoom in so you can see it. We've got this role, which is called the web front end. Its instance count is 10. If we come down here and we look at this one, we've got a role name, which is called CRM processing, and its instance count is also 10. So that's 10 servers. There's 10 instances of servers to do these different jobs. Whoops, just went to the wrong place. So back on the slides, what I'm going to do with these documents is each one of, not so much the SQL, but each one of these things is going to need to have some code put onto it. So I need some binary code. So I write some code, and I write it to work on the web front end, and I'll write it to work in this tier here, and I create my service model. So there's the code. It's been deployed onto all the different boxes, and that's called a package, a cloud service package, a CSPKG. I now need to have my service model. So there's my service model. That's the XML representation of this diagram, as I showed you earlier. And, well, that's part of the service model, I should say. And those two things together form a package, and we get a hold of Windows Azure, and we send that to Azure for us. Okay, so we send one sort of set of information. The next thing we need is the remaining description of what this architecture looks like, and we send that. So we've effectively sent two things. We've sent the package, which includes that first part of the service model, to Microsoft. We sent the service model itself, which is the description of what the environment looks like, to Microsoft. And we said, can you build that for me and run it for me? So that's what I'm going to do in this demo. So is it that one? Yeah. So I go new, cloud service, custom create, give it a name, Planky Cloud 2. I just define where I want to deploy it to, and I will say North Europe. I always do North Europe. I then say what the deployment name is, so I'm going to call this the production system. And I've got to find the package. So there's my package, CSPKG, that's that one. And then I've got to get the configuration information, and that file that I was editing earlier, this one, serviceconfiguration.cloud.cscfg, that is this file here. I'm going to put it into the production environment. I'm going to deploy it no matter what. I'm going to start the deployment, and I'm going to hit the go button. So that's now going through the process of creating, I think there's 40 servers in this application. So it's going to go through the process of creating 10 web front ends, 10 CRM processing layers, I don't know, 5 policy servers, 5 backup servers. So can't remember exactly what the numbers were. So that's going to take, I was timing it outside, it takes about, I did it about 3 times. It takes between 9 and 11 minutes to do that. Now, rather than wait 9 or 11 minutes, I've got one here, which has already been configured. And you can see here are the various instances. Now, I've got a warning there because I wrote this on one of the old SDKs, and it's just a warning. It says, eventually you're going to run out of time on that one. But these are all the different servers. So you can see app reporting, IN, instance 0. So instance 0, instance 1, instance 2, instance 3, instance 4. That's the 5 app reporting servers. CRM processing, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Perhaps I should zoom this in a little bit. You can see the others down here. CRM processing, and then we go to CRM reporting. And if we go onto the next page, I'll come down here, go on to page 2, these are the other servers. So I've got my policy module and my web front end. And you can see I've got everything between 0 and 9. So that's 10 web front end servers. And they're all running. So if I want to connect to this, then I just go back here. It shows me the URL, hoipe.cloudapp.net. And this is live on the internet. Any of you could connect to this if you wanted to. And I go here, and it should load up the application. And there's my big Plankytronic CRM application, which is actually just a screenshot, but it's got to. Okay, one of the other things that I want to show you in the portal with cloud services is what I can also do with scaling, and I can do this with the other services that I've showed you as well. to greater or lesser degrees, is I can scale. Let's just take something like, let's take the web front end. So here's the web front end, and I could say, I've currently got that set to 10 instances, 10 servers. I could scale it up to 120 instances, or I could scale it to some other number which is suitable for the workloads that I expect. But one of the other things I could do is I could say, well, what I'd like to do is set up a schedule. And I could say, I would like this schedule to, I'll give it a name, I don't know, morning. And I say between 7 a.m. and 11 a.m., I'm going to define this thing called morning. And then I use that option to go in and I say, slide the slider up to say, let's just say 20 servers, because I know that I'm always busy between 7 a.m. and 11 a.m. and I need 20 servers to service that workload. And then at 11 a.m., it will schedule scale it back down to the 10 servers that I started with. So you can have different times of day when you have lots of or few servers. So that's one thing you could do. You can use a schedule to do it. Another thing you could do is you could just base it on either CPU or the queue depth. So if you take CPU, for example, the sort of thing you could do is you could say, I never want to have more than 20 instances. Here, look. Well, let's get this into the middle here so you can see these numbers a bit better. I never want to have any more than 73 instances. I never want to have less than 42. So a reason for restricting the upper number of instances is because you possibly don't want to have a bill that big. So you want to restrict your cost. You never want to go below 42 because you know that for the, you've got this really busy site and for anything less than 42 is just not going to handle the load. So those are the two limits. Now, let's just imagine that you're currently on 42. You're in a quiet period. Then what we say is, as the CPU utilization goes up on all of those 42 instances above 80%, then we'll scale up and give you 43 instances. And then, so that's going to spread the load a little bit more. And then 44 instances, 45 instances, all the way up to 73. Now let's imagine you get to 73 and we don't scale anymore. But then the users that are hitting your website start to fall off. So they start to come down. Now when the CPU gets down to 60% in this case, or should we say, when it gets down to 41%, that's a trigger to say, take one of those servers out of the configuration. And then it goes down a bit more, and we take the next server out of the configuration. So you can see that you can scale by a particular metric. And the metrics that we have are CPU and queue to be able to do that with. Okay, there's another way of doing scaling, actually, which is all of this stuff that I'm showing you uses a service management API. So what you could do is you could monitor your own application yourself using something a bit more meaningful. CPU is kind of a bit orthogonal to what's really going on, isn't it? There's all sorts of reasons why the CPU might be at 81%. It might be because you're doing something like or it might be because the system is automatically doing a Windows update for you, or is applying a patch, or is just moved the workload and the system's just boot. There's all sorts of reasons why you might be at high CPU load. But you might know that, 41 instances, you know that you can get 1,500 users across your servers if you're using your particular application if you've got 41 instances. So when you get to 1,600 users, maybe that could be a trigger for you to scale your operation. So you would monitor your own internal application and then call the service management API to do something more interesting than this for you. Okay, so let's go back to the slides. Hello? Yep.
The configuration package and the service package.
Yep.
What do you use to create that with?
Well, I use Visual Studio. So when you go into Visual Studio and you, I'm running out of time, so I won't have time to show it. But you create a cloud service, and you get nodes that say things like a web role or web front end, whatever you call it. When as you double click on those, you get a property sheet that comes up. As you change those things, it creates a CS CFG and a CS def for you. Those are the two files that get modified. You can modify them by hand as well. No, I mean, sometimes you'll find, when we introduce a new feature, a new SDK, when it's brand new, before the tool set arrives, we might say something like, and put these entries into this file. But mostly you can do it through the UI. But sometimes, if you want to create more than one website on a web server, for example, you've got to manually do that. Okay. Right, so that was that. Seen all that. Next. So that's the end of that. So let's talk about the next steps. So if you want to see all the stuff that I've shown you, if you want to see that as a series of videos, you can sit down, slowly watch it, then aka.ms/12 to 16 May demos. You'll be able to get access to all these slides afterwards, so you don't have to write this down, but that's an option. Sign up for Azure, aka.ms/MS Cloud Trial. And also, there's a free training kit, which is very good. There's actually about 35 labs in there that cover all aspects of what I've been talking about here and more. And that's at aka.ms/WATK, Windows Azure Training Kit. There's also the Windows Azure blog, blogs.msdn.com/Windows Azure. My blog, I blog mostly on either cloud or security, or where the two things overlap. Also, whenever I do anything on my blog, I usually tweet it as well. So if you just think about these as the next steps for your journey towards getting more involved with Windows Azure. Great, thanks very much for your time. It was really nice of you not to fall asleep, although I was the guy at the back there who did. Thank you, cheers.